Did you know that almost all American music genres that we know today come from African Americans? Such as ragtime, possibly the first ever truly American music genre. The last thing that you probably think of when you hear this is African Americans, but you most definitely know songs by Scott Joplin, such as The Entertainer. Which perfectly leads into this claim that I have that African Americans have significant influence in the history of American music, both known and unknown. Coming after ragtime, a new genre known as jazz emerges in the streets of Louisiana, a genre characterized for its syncopathic rhythms, which is ironic because modern forms of jazz have become associated with white conformist society compared to when it first came out when it was seen as lowbrow and rebellious. So if you were somebody who was uninformed on these sorts of music genres, you'd be forgiven for having these misconceptions, because that is what white America intended. Find a unique sound, use it, rebrand it, and give it a white face to then take all the credit, which is why I'm labeling this the unknown. Then there's country, possibly the most stereotypical white American music genre ever. But did you know that Jimmie Rodgers is widely considered the father of country music? He combined a number of different music genres to forge a style of music that led to the influence of many country artists to come, such as Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton. Also, with the forming of country music, instruments such as the fiddle and the banjo had immense influence in the forming of not only country but also hillbilly music. I know this information due to the Smithsonian website, which highlights African American traditional instruments that have immense influence, and most of them just happen to be influential in country. Finally, for the unknown section, I'm going to talk about rock and roll. And most of you probably already know who the white poster boy for rock and roll is. Showing once again how America would take a black sound and appropriate it to try and present it as original white music. And unlike country, after the attempt to appropriate rock and roll, artists such as Jimi Hendrix and Prince were still able to gain immense popularity and become some of the most popular rock and roll artists to ever exist. Now, this is really evident when I look at these lists that I have from thespin.com for rock and roll and Billboard's list for country. Now, my spin.com list does not include bands like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, because unlike rock and roll, country just doesn't have bands. Now, the rock and roll list consists of David Bowie, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Prince, and Keith Richards, while the country list contains Hank Williams Sr., Loretta Lynn, Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, and Dolly Parton. Notice anything? On the rock and roll side, not only are there two African Americans in Jimi Hendrix and Prince, but they're both in the top 3. Whereas on the country side, there are 0 African American artists in the top 5. So for the rest of my video, I'm going to be using the source of timelinecarnagehill.org, where they have a African American music timeline that has a bunch of different genres to go along with the influence that the African Americans have, as well as primary sources to go with each of the genres. The term rock and roll has been traced back as far as the 1920s in black music, but this term became accepted as the label for this developing genre when in 1951, Cleveland disc jockey Alan Freed began calling his rhythm and blues radio show Moondog's Rock and Roll Party. Little Richard, Fat Domino, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and several other African American music artists were some of the first to ever transform this sound of rhythm and blues by introducing new musical elements. This transformation of sounds from rhythm and blues is a perfect transition into my next segment, which I'm going to call The Known, where I'm going to speak about African American influence in areas of music that people are just generally more aware of. To start this portion of my video, I'm first going to talk about the genre of rhythm and blues. The term itself comes from Jerry Wexler, who coined it to replace its previous name, race music. Now, even though rhythm and blues has acquired musical elements from pop for mainstream acceptance and marketed under the rock and roll label, record labels continue to produce jazz blues combo styled rhythm and blues for African American communities. Artists such as Ray Charles, Tina Turner, James Brown, and Aretha Franklin saw immense success under this sound that would become labeled as soul. Now, I know what most of you are thinking. This is not the rhythm and blues I was thinking of. That's because you're thinking of R&B. While yes, they are the same, they're also completely different. In the 1970s to early 80s, black popular music became so diverse and evolved in so many different ways that it caused for another label change. And the term black music was then formed, which later got changed to what we now know as R&B in the early 1990s. This umbrella term was used to categorize all sorts of black popular music and was influenced by people such as Michael Jackson, whose 1982 funk pop album Thriller helped pave this way of versatile music that couldn't just be categorized under one simple term: hip hop and rap. From its humble beginnings in the Bronx, New York, rap music has moved into mainstream, redefining the soundscape and character of American popular culture, and contributing to the growth of a billion-dollar entertainment industry. Hip hop music culture is a product of African American, Afro Caribbean, and Latino inner city communities plagued by poverty, the proliferation of drugs, and gang violence in the early 1960s. Now, this music is categorized into two parts: old school and new school. Old school was associated with a party oriented musical and lyrical style focusing on DJs and MCs and dancers. New school replaced these party sounds for new aggressive sounds, and this hard edged aesthetic emphasized a heavy backbeat incorporating real sounds of the inner city, such as gunshots, sirens, street cries, and occasional political speech. And during the late 80s and early 90s, electronic and digital versions of hip hop became more and more popular, slowly pushing out live performances. All the stuff that I named and so much more shows just how much immense influence African Americans have in the history of American music and just how it's both known and unknown.